Welcome to Care, where we have candid conversations about giving care and receiving care.
As experts in psychology, mind-body wellness, and caregiver well-being, we created a new genre of support for caregivers. We joined the caregiver team, providing individualized tools and resources to help caregivers transform their experience.
I'm Jackie, a licensed clinical psychologist and certified yoga instructor, passionate about providing holistic solutions to transform people's relationship to stress and overwhelm. I love supporting caregivers in navigating the complexities of their roles and returning to their priorities, especially returning to themselves.
And I'm Marcie, a licensed clinical psychologist and expert in neuropsychology, on a mission to help caregivers notice where they're stuck and work together with them to identify and build strategies to get unstuck. When I was suddenly diagnosed with breast cancer, a whole new perspective was introduced to caregiving care. From caregiver expert to care recipient, I found myself in a unique position to bridge the gap between the experience of providing care and receiving care.
Join us on a journey examining different caregiving topics and experiences in which we draw from both our professional expertise and now very personal experience. Full disclosure, caregiving struggles just got a lot more personal. Okay, well, we are back with another episode of Care, and this is episode 8. And actually, this is going to be our final episode of Care, specifically, at least for now, just to kind of wrap up with where we've been with this and talk a little bit about Marcie's personal journey and where she's at with kind of the, I guess I'll put it in quotes, like conclusion of where you're at so far with your own experience in the cancer journey. I feel like calling it a journey is like way more of a positive spin, but like you've said those words too before, so I feel like it's just like the easiest way to describe it. So yeah, we'll talk about a few different things, and then certainly people will be hearing from us at Caregiving Care with more videos, probably some interviews and other exciting things in the near future. But for now, this will kind of be it for the Care series specifically. And we may reopen the files sometime as well.
Yes, the best part is who knows what the future holds.
Yes, and hopefully all good stuff.
Oh my God, yeah, fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like in our conversations, we both kind of felt like we were at a natural kind of at least pause point, if not like, stopping point for care. I finished up chemotherapy toward the end of May. And we've kind of been doing this. We started like right before my first round, and have been recording these candid conversations throughout. And I think, we've touched on a lot of important topics, competing priorities, when people ask you, how are you, how to sort of navigate that challenging question. How do you, keep a semblance of normalcy when everything is so chaotic and feels anything but normal. And when you also have to be realistic about new expectations. We've talked about problem solving and the writing reflex and, what to do with people who have new limitations. And so we've covered a lot of ground, I feel like. And yeah, thought it would be a good time to sort of wind down, follow the course of my treatment. Things are going well, just like a brief update from me. Things are going pretty well. I've had this lovely break in active treatment between chemo and then the next steps. So I've been really trying to just enjoy this time. It can be challenging to balance between, wanting to enjoy this period of time and feeling like I need to squeeze a lot of stuff into this period of time and worrying a lot about the future. So that's all been kind of, you know, challenges during this time. Um, but but I did go on a nice vacation with my family, which was amazing, and I'm so glad we were able to do that. So yeah, it's been really nice. And then I have another surgery in July, and then I'll start radiation in the middle of August. And then hopefully, if things go well, that will sort of my active treatment will wind down in the fall, and I'll go on a more maintenance type therapy. Um, so yeah, that's sort of personally where I'm at right now.
Yeah. How long is radiation treatment that starts in August?
So I'll be doing 6 weeks, 5 days a week. So
Okay.
30 rounds.
Full full time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's kind of wild, especially, when thinking about the different roles that I play and that many people play in their lives. I know that oftentimes, right, caregiving, even though it's a full-time position, it's not an exclusive position for many people, right? Like you have many different roles that you're juggling. And so yeah, for me, it's sort of like, okay, radiation now is gonna be another full-time role to add on to psychologist and mom and partner and all the different roles that I'm playing.
Yeah, for sure. That makes so much sense. I mean, it's a lot. And I think your perspective on like allowing yourself to kind of be present with each step, even though knowing that of course there's anxiety and planning and like worries about the future, just like, okay, what's August going to be like? Or like, a little bit beyond that too. How have you navigated it like with the people who help you and like provide you with care? So like your family, your husband, is was there like some kind of plan that's already in place for this time period, or like what kinds of things or maybe even challenges have come up with that when it comes to like now you're basically like like you have the foresight like okay, I'm going to need some extra help during this time.
Yeah, so, like, for the radiation
Yes,
coming
that
up.
is what I mean specifically, yeah.
Yeah, no, so we, like, we've tried to learn from our experiences over the course of the year, right? Particularly, like, after my last surgery, um, and during chemo, just sort of setting ourselves up for, um like as much support as possible and doing that kind of within the parameters of what works well for the caregivers in our life.
Mhm.
So that's a little vague, but I'll explain what I mean. Um, so we basically like went through our calendar, and after my surgery I won't be able to lift again for 4 weeks, um which turned out to be like one of the most challenging parts of the recovery from the mastectomy, especially because I have a small child.
For sure, yeah.
And so it worked really well previously. Like my mom helps us a ton, but like 6 a.m. is not her time to shine. Like that's not that's not when it's gonna be like a productive and like, you know, that's not gonna be good for anybody involved. And so
Mhm.
like we've arranged for my son's old nanny to come and, 5 days a week be with us from 6 a.m. until she drops him off at daycare. And then on days that my husband works late, help me like be here with me to pick him up and like until my husband gets back from work. And we've been very fortunate, like we're very fortunate that we have that support and that we can bring her on. And I think, you know recognizing that like that's something that we needed to prioritize. Like it is of course an expense, and also like it's something that we really needed to prioritize because we do need my mom's help, and also it's really important that like she helps us in the way that like works for her in addition to working for us. Like she's expressed to me that like she, at least for the first week of radiation, like wants to come with me and like doesn't want me to go alone. Which is like lovely and wonderful. So it's just kind of navigating like in the support system that we have, who can we tap when that's gonna like keep the unit running smoothly, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So, like, you've done this like upfront coordination, which it sounds like it's probably been hard. I mean, that is a lot. I mean, now, right? Like now you have a plan, and it's just like we can hear that plan and be like, that makes so much sense. Like, sounds great. But I'm imagining getting there was a little bit of like a lot of balls in the air at once.
Yeah, I mean it's, logistics, and you have to think through it and figure out like when you need the help, um and it's the type of thing that like it doesn't leave a whole lot of room for any kind of like unexpected thing to
Yeah,
happen. So like we've kind of made a plan for like best case scenario, keeping in mind that like it's not always the best case scenario that plays out. So
yeah,
like we'll have to, troubleshoot as we go along. I think what we've learned, one thing that we've learned is that like you can't plan for every situation. The really best that you can do is plan to be flexible.
yeah. That makes sense for sure. Because unexpected stuff does pop up, and there could be a variety of that pops up, like with any number of people. So you kind of have to be okay with it being chaotic in those times, I guess, and like ready to be flexible, which is really, really freaking hard. And I mean, I think that relates a lot on kind of a different level, but to like when maybe especially when it's like a not hired caregiver, but a caregiver, right? Who like you're taking care of your aging parent, or maybe you're a sandwich caregiver, right? And something unexpected comes up. Like I remember my mom was my grandma's primary caregiver, and at a point like onboarded help, and there was always unexpected things that came up, and there was iterations of it, and there was different people across time, and there was abrupt surprising things that would come up where all of a sudden it was like, okay, well now she's just kind of left hanging and like having to figure it out. And I think that can be so hard, and it does become the norm that you're like, okay, well, expect the unexpected. Like I could be comfortable with this person caring for, my aging mom right now, but they could quit, or they could be like, oh, her level of care now is something that like I can't lift her, right? I can't help with that. And then my mom would have to pivot and be like, pick it up, on her own, would have to stay there more, would have to work on maybe piecing together additional support. Um, and I mean, the same, like in your case, right? Obviously different than like my grandma who was aging, right? And like who was also really stressed and overwhelmed. And I think very anxious about those kinds of changes. But for you, it's even different because like you're young and you're like very cognizant, right? Of like what's going on and aware. And when you see those changes come up and you're also feeling, and you could tell me if this is true, like feeling the pressure sometimes of like, okay, well, now others have to pivot around me. And like you have to also be really flexible and being okay with accepting and receiving the help and knowing that like it's chaotic for other people too. But it is for you as well.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think one of the harder things to do in this experience have has been, And I know for my husband for sure, but also for me, like what you said about learning to receive help has been a real learning journey. Like, I feel like we are oftentimes like, many of us want to help other people, right? And are much less much less skilled at receiving help for ourselves. And, like, one thing that, like, I've really learned over so going back to, um November and early December when I had my mastectomy, like, initially a friend brought up, doing a meal train, so, like, organizing for people to have meals, make meals and deliver like, bring them over to our house so that we didn't have to worry about cooking, and I think I've mentioned that a couple of times, and at first my husband was like, "No, like, we don't really need that, like, we can just we'll figure it out, like, whatever," and my friend and my sister were just like, "No, we're just gonna set it up." And, like, it was the most helpful thing. When my sister had her mastectomy, her prophylactic mastectomy a couple months later, I was like, "Let me set up a meal train for you." It was the most helpful thing. And she and my brother-in-law were like, "No, we don't really need it. Like, we can just we'll figure it out." And I was like, "I'm just gonna set it up for you."
Yeah,
And
you're gonna
after
need
that, she was like, "That was the most helpful thing." And then a couple weeks ago, I was talking to a friend of mine, and she was telling me that she had an upcoming surgery. And I was like, "Do you have a meal train set up?" And she was like, "No, I don't." And I was like, "Okay, like, I'm gonna set one up for you." And she was like, "Okay, that would be great." And I was like, "Yes!"
Mhm.
Like, bravo.
Yeah. Yeah, acceptance.
Like, and it's was really helpful to her. And, like, I have this surgery coming up in a couple weeks. And, like, even though it makes me, like, a little uncomfortable because it feels kind of, like, weird to do, I'm probably gonna, like, go to my friend and my sister and be like, "Hey, would one of you mind setting up a meal train? Like, that was really, really helpful to
Yeah,
us the first time around." And, like, right, it makes me feel, like, a little vulnerable or, like, weird because it's almost like what it is, right? It's asking for help,
yeah,
which I'm just not as skilled at. Um
yeah,
And I think that it's a skill worth developing because it can take a lot of the burden off of, the person who's already experiencing a lot of difficulties.
for sure, for sure. I also think that, like, just by the nature of, like, the environments that we've selected for our career, right? Like, as psychologists, I mean, definitely under the umbrella, right, of like a helping profession. Of course, right, it is also our livelihood, right? Like, it's an exchange of energy and money as well, and like all of those things. And it's a helping profession. I think we're, I mean, we've selected that environment for a reason, right? Like, we're comfortable in that role of
Mm.
giving care. I wouldn't bat an eye if a client like reached out and was like, "Hey, do you have any extra availability this week?" If it was like a week that we weren't meeting or something like that, right? I mean, if I had availability, if I could make it work, I would make it work. I wouldn't be like, "Wow, like that's really weird," right? Like, we're comfortable with that. Like, ask for help. Like, we teach people to ask for help. We
Mhm.
validate them, right, for doing that. And of course, right, like for also being independent and all that stuff. But usually, I would say probably a lot of the people that, we both see, like, they often struggle like we do, right, for asking for help. So like, we're so comfortable being in this other position of like encouraging people to do that. And then when the shoe's on the other foot, it feels so foreign sometimes, especially when the asking for help is more than just like, I want to talk this through really quick. I think we're very comfortable with that. We're very comfortable with like processing or like, hey, I want to like run this idea by you or like what consulting on something. But when it comes to almost like asking for tangible support or
Yes.
asking for someone to inconvenience their
Then
life,
no.
knowing that it will, right?
Right.
Like
Like, "Hey,
that
can you
feels
make
hard.
me a meal?" Or,
Right.
"Hey, can you come and watch my loved one while I go do X, Y, and Z?"
Right. Right. Totally. Yeah. So I
It's
think that is
very
really hard.
and really important to do,
Mhm.
I think.
Yeah.
And I think that, right, like, depending on what support you have, like, who lives close to you, who, is in your network, like, that all factors in, right, to asking and receiving help. I do think that there are, though, good resources out there that sometimes people, especially if you're already feeling overwhelmed, it can be really natural for your brain to just sort of go into that all or nothing. And so, sort of saying, like, I don't have that, like, there's no one there who can
Yeah.
support me. Um, and just kind of shutting it down. But I think that it's worth trying to get creative or looking into different resources, respite services, departments of aging, things like that, that can offer resources
Mhm.
to people.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, and it makes me think of just like kind of the basis of caregiving care and what we started, which is that it is really it's more like in the nature of the caregiver. I mean, regardless of like how complicated it feels and everything, right? But like to be willing to go give the help, right, to the person they're caring for, but to completely put themselves last, or maybe to not even ask for additional help, or maybe to feel like, a little bit of learned helplessness, like no one else is around to help me. So I'm just like not even gonna try. And I think our whole point is how can we show up for that person, for the caregiver, right? Because we already know the person they're caring for, I mean, has their own unique set of circumstances and needs and challenges for sure. And they are often receiving care, right? And sometimes just like by necessity, and sometimes have a whole team of support around them where the caregiver is really isolated and also struggles, maybe doesn't have the natural tendency to receive help and accept it.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And it feels like maybe something that, like, on the surface sounds like, oh, yeah, it's like easy to ask for help, right? Like, we teach our children that at a very young age. Like, if you need, like, ask mama to help you with that, or ask, you know what I mean? Like, and it's not. Like,
Yeah.
as we do live in a very individualistic society, and I think that that plays into it, right? Like, we sort of have, many of us sort of at our cores, like, feel like we have to, like, do it ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. For sure. I mean, so it's a skill that really you've been forced to hone now because of what's going on. And like again, I think when something is to the level of like, okay, physically though, Marcy, like you can't be doing this if you're gonna recover, right? Like you can't be picking up your kid for this long. It's like you are really forced to tolerate that level of discomfort of asking for help and asking for people to help you physically, right? Which again is like that next level. It's not just saying like, oh, like I really just need to talk about how I feel about this thing, which is also very, very challenging for people. But again, more in our wheelhouse, I think, like more like, okay, I'm comfortable doing that. I could reach out to 100 people right now and be like, can you listen to me talk about this thing?
Yeah.
But to be like, hey, can you come over at 6 a.m. to literally like lift my kid around because I can't do that at like even if you ask me to, I can't do that. So like you need to do this. Like that is next level discomfort, I think.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because, like you said, like, the physical, like, it's such a clear boundary that
Yeah.
it sets for us, whereas, like, the more emotional receiving of help, or, like, psychological asking for help, like, the consequences aren't necessarily the consequences of not asking for help or not being willing to receive help are not necessarily as immediate as
Hmm.
the physical. Like, I remember after my mastectomy, like, I was probably like 3 weeks post, and I wasn't supposed to lift for 6 weeks, and I was, like, feeling pretty good. Also, like, I think I was on medication, but I
Feeling good, feeling good.
feeling pretty good. Um, and me and my husband were gonna give our son a bath. And my husband, I was getting my son undressed, and my husband like went out of the bathroom to like grab something. And the bath was filling up, and my son like started to like kind of climb into the tub. And I thought, like, I'm feeling pretty good. Like, it's a very, like, I'm not gonna lift him. I'm just gonna kind
Hmm.
of help him go, like, get over the edge of the tub. And like, that was a huge mistake.
Mm.
Like, it hurt immediately and so bad and for, like, days.
Oh gosh.
And, like right, so, like, when we have those physical limitations, it can be, like, there's a very clear boundary, like, as much as I wanted to lift him into the tub, like, I quickly learned that that was just not an option, but I think that why receiving and asking for help for some of like the psychological, emotional, self-care, those types of things can be even harder than
Yeah.
asking and receiving help for physical limitations because the consequences aren't as obvious in some
Yeah.
ways.
Yeah. Yeah. More gradual, maybe too.
Yeah.
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 I mean, that definitely makes sense. And I think that's really important. Like, I think when we kind of share how we ask for help, or maybe even how we've denied help, but then like got it anyway, like you were talking about the meal train, right? And like just how meaningful that actually was, and just how practical that was, and how like psychologically that, just gave some more freedom to like another decision that doesn't need to be made or thought about, or physically doing that. um but that's really important and useful for people to see. Like, I mean, I know when I hear and see that, I'm like, okay, like, yes, that's a great reminder that like it's okay and also necessary. And then also like it's the kind thing to do, I think, right? Is like another way to look at it. Like I think about like in my yoga teacher training, we would talk about like nonviolence, nonviolence towards self and others. And like I think it can be really easy to think about that in a practical way, like toward others, right? Okay, like yeah, I can be kind to others, but how can we be kind to ourselves? And that's not just like, words of affirmation or something. That's actually allowing ourselves to be vulnerable and trusting sometimes in the process, and that somebody else can show up for us and to let them do that.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so that's sort of where things are at now. So gearing up gearing up for next steps, figuring out what help I'm gonna need and
Mhm.
how I'm gonna receive it. Um, but yeah, it's been chemo was something.
Yeah.
Wou wouldn't recommend it, folks.
Yeah. would not would not do it again if had the choice,
Yeah,
basically.
yeah, wouldn't, but you
Well,
never
although I guess you would do it again if you had the like given the same circumstances, but like
yeah.
ideally don't.
Ideally, not in those circumstances again.
Yeah. I think it's really like, I mean, thank you for like being so vulnerable and sharing your like experiences as we've talked about this, because I think, yeah, I was telling somebody about caregiving care. They had seen it and they were asking me about like one of their relatives, and I was explaining, and then I was like, "Oh, we also have um, this series if like that would be helpful for them to watch or tune into at any point with the corresponding blog, the Care to Care series." And I was explaining how like you, right, like somewhere along the way here, kind of like maybe a year or so into us like kind of working on this, that's when your cancer diagnosis came. And so I was explaining how like we've pivoted in ways and how that's actually been included in our work. And I was like, that wasn't how it started. I was like, that's not actually where this came from. That's just like where it's gone.
Yeah. Yeah. And right, again, brings us back to the journey. So
Mhm. Yeah.
excited to see where the journey continues to take us, and hopefully
Yeah.
that'll include many more conversations together.
Yeah, for sure. I think this is a nice like conclusion, even if it's just for now, to our care to care series. And for anybody who's like listening or maybe reading the blog that corresponds with this, um, yeah, definitely tune back in. Sign up for our freebie, which is the caregiver burnout log. Through that, you'll be subscribed to our email list. We do not just like willy nilly send emails. We really only do it when we have something new to offer, whether that is like a new free resource or a new product. And we have some things that we're working on that we're really excited about. So definitely sign up for that. If you haven't, you could just go to our website, which is caregivecare.com. I was like, caregivecare.com, and it'll pop up and you can just sign up that way. And um, yeah, like share our services, share the care to care series. I know this has been really helpful for some people. We've gotten some feedback on that. So, and I've enjoyed it too. And I know that there will be more other conversations to come too.
Awesome. Talk soon.